What's up, guys? It is Luke Beller. Want to say Happy New Year to everybody. Can't believe that it's January 1st of 2021. It's honestly crazy. 2020 honestly felt like a super long year, but also it's weird that it's now over. But I want to say thank you to everyone who subscribed in 2020. I started the channel back in May, and it's been awesome to see you guys come along, follow along. I really appreciate, all you guys who have been watching and supporting the channel. And so now we're going to get into the topic of today's video. And, most of you guys watching this know we're playing the Bears on Sunday. I think it's like 3-something. Packers versus Bears, Week 17 matchup. And this is an exciting game just because both teams have a lot, on the line in this game. First off, we got the Packers, who, if we beat the Bears, the Packers will be the #1 seed in the NFC, and with only one NFC team getting a bye, obviously that's even much more important this year. And so the Packers really, want to get this win so that they can have home field advantage in Lambeau Field. And then we got the Bears, who, if they win, they make the playoffs. So we have two teams who really have a lot riding on this game. But just to, sort of let you guys know, also, if the Packers were to lose, if the Seahawks lose to the 49ers, the Packers still get the #1 seed. And then for the Bears, if the Bears were to lose, they could still make the playoffs, but they would need the Cardinals to lose to the Rams. So those are a few different, scenarios that could happen, for them to make the playoffs, for the Packers to get the #1 seed. But if both teams, if they win, then they sort of get that desired outcome for the playoffs. So now if we sort of start off on the Bears side of the ball on the offense, it's been sort of an odd year for the Bears. Now they're sitting at 8-7. Started off really hot, and they have that 6-game losing streak. And then in the past few weeks, they've really been heating up. Have won their last 3 games, have scored 30-plus points in all 3 of their last games. Those have been games, though, against the Texans, Vikings, and Jaguars. So, not the best teams, but still, the Bears have been playing good on offense. So it really seemed to turn around for this Bears offense, 5 weeks ago, when Nagy sort of turned the play calling over to the offensive coordinator, Bill Lazor, or Lazor, whatever you say his name. And they've sort of committed a lot more to the run with David Montgomery. And Montgomery has been playing really good in his last 5 weeks. We take a look at his stats. He's rushed for 529 yards, averaging 5.6 yards per carry, crazy stat, and 6 touchdowns. And if we compare, those 5 games where he's been, pretty dominant in the past few games to his first 9 games. In his first 9 games, he only had 472 rush yards, averaging only 3.6 yards per carry, and 1 touchdown. So it seems that this Bears offense has been heating up, and now Montgomery is 5th in the NFL when it comes to rush yards for the season, sitting at 1,001 yards, so he did break that 1,000-yard mark in the last game. And then we take a look at Mitch Trubisky. He returns as starter in Week 12, and in his last 4 games, he's been playing pretty good. He's completed 72% of his passes, has thrown 7 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and has a 108.5 rating. And so now, with the way that he's played in these past few games, lots of people seem to think that maybe the Bears will, return to him in 2020, because earlier in the season, there were sort of questions for, the Bears quarterback situation with Foles, with Trubisky. But now Trubisky seems to be playing good in the past few games. Past 4 games, he's 3-1, and the Bears are averaging 35 points per game. And so the question is, will this Bears offense continue their hot streak against this Packers defense? And I sort of think for the Packers, we know that the defense is the weak spot for the Packers. But recently, the Packers defense has been playing a lot better. Our secondary is probably, maybe one of the top secondaries in the NFL. Right now, the Packers defense is 7th when it comes to yards allowed per game. So pretty good, top 10 defense when it comes solely to yards. And so I think it will be tough for Trubisky to move the ball, to pass the ball against his Packers secondary especially. We have Jair Alexander, one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL. We have Darnell Savage, who has been playing as the best safety in the NFL. Since Week 11, he's allowing a 4.5 passer rating, so he's been playing great as well. And then other safety, Adrian Amos, has been ranked 7th since Week 11 when you look at PFF's grade. So this Packers secondary has been playing, overall pretty good. So I think it's going to be tough for Trubisky to pass against his secondary. If we take a look at his stats back in Week 12 when he played against the Packers, 24 for 36, 3 touchdowns, but he did throw 2 interceptions and had a sack fumble. So who knows what's going to happen in this game with Trubisky. He is only 1-5 when facing the Packers, so who knows what will happen in this game with Trubisky. But I do think the Bears will probably try to focus on the run in this game with, Montgomery playing as good as he has been playing. This Packers defense is known at times to give up big games to running backs. Even though last week versus the Titans, we saw just how good this Packers run defense can be. Allowing only 98 yards to Derrick Henry, probably the best running back, if not one of the best running backs in the NFL. But I do still think they're going to need to rely on the run. So if the Packers get off to a fast start, as they have against lots of teams, it's going to be tough for this Bears team to rely on the run. So we'll have to see what happens in that category. So now if we switch over to this Packers offense. And first off, we have to start out talking about, yesterday's news with David Bakhtiari. Obviously, a big blow to the Packers. David Bakhtiari likely tearing his ACL. He's done for the season regardless of what, that injury is. So that's definitely not good news considering he's probably the best, tackle in the NFL, if not the best offensive lineman in the NFL. The Packers just pay him like $100 million, and now he's out. He could be out even to the beginning of next season if he did tear his ACL. So with the Packers facing, front, Khalil Mack, you got Akeem Hicks coming back who wasn't playing in the last game in Week 12 versus the Packers. So it's going to be a lot harder for this Packers team to protect Aaron Rodgers. But the Packers offensive line has been the best in the NFL, obviously centered around David Bakhtiari. But I do still think the Packers will be able to finagle their line a little bit. We would obviously be a lot better with David Bakhtiari there. But I'm confident the Packers can at least, fill those holes. Will they be as good as David Bakhtiari? Obviously, there's no question that they will not be as good as Bakhtiari. But I'm hoping that this Packers line can stand up. So it's going to be a good test for this line. Honestly, curious to see just sort of how this Packers offense, decides to use our offensive line come Sunday. So as we all know, Aaron Rodgers has had, probably one of the best years of his career. Davante Adams having one of the best years of his career. So even though David Bakhtiari is down, a big blow to the Packers offense, but this Packers offense is still dynamic regardless, as if we have, David Bakhtiari or not. Aaron Rodgers still, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL to this day. Probably the best, playing the best right now. So efficient. And if we take a look at last game versus the Bears, sort of what he did in that game, threw for 211 yards, 4 touchdowns with a 132.3 rating. So great game for Rodgers in that last game. So the question is, will the Packers be able to, do well in this game, even though pressure could be coming onto Rodgers? Because one of the worst games for the Packers this season was that Buccaneers game, where I think they got like 5 or 6 sacks against the Packers, and we haven't really seen the offensive line sort of fall apart like that since that game. So hopefully, the Packers can stand up, because if Aaron Rodgers can't get protected, obviously it's going to be hard for him to throw the ball. And then if we take a look at this Packers run game, last time we faced the Bears in Week 12, we ran for 182 yards, averaging 4.7 yards per carry. In that game, Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams pretty much were split in carries. Jones had 17 carries for 90 yards, and Williams had 17 carries for 73 yards. And last week, Williams missed the game, which sort of led the door wide open for A.J. Dillon, who had a monster game rushing for like over 100 yards. Great game for A.J. Dillon, and so obviously now, with Williams being back as well, the Packers really have a three-headed monster at running back with Aaron Jones, one of the best running backs in the NFL, Jamal Williams, a great, second guy, and then now we got A.J. Dillon, who looked crazy good in that cold, snowy game at Lambeau Field. So it's going to be tough for the Bears to stop this Packers offense. So right now, the Bears defense is 15th when it comes to rush yards allowed per game, allowing 115.7, and 13th when it comes to pass yards allowed point per game, allowing 231.2. So pretty much, middle of the road for this Bears defense. So it's going to be, honestly, I think it's going to be a great game. Both teams have a lot to play for. So I'd say my score prediction for this game, I'm going to go with Packers 38, Bears 31. I think it's going to be a pretty close game. Both teams have a lot to play for. I think it's going to be a great matchup. Who knows? Could go down in history. Bears-Packers, always a great game. But I'd be curious to hear your guys' thoughts. Give me your score predictions down below and sort of why you think that could happen. But that's going to be all for today's video. Make sure you guys like it. Subscribe if you've not subscribed to the channel. Hope you guys enjoy watching the game, and I'll see you guys on the next one.